A winter morning in New York began with a gray sky and sparse snowflakes gently falling onto the sidewalks. The city was waking up. Taxi drivers honked in traffic, pedestrians hurried to the subway, and hot steam escaped from the ventilation grates. Victoria Harris wrapped herself tighter in her warm wool scarf and clutched her leather bag closer. Her fingers were frozen, and her breath turned into mist. She stood at the bus stop near a cafe on Fifth Avenue, watching the passers-by. Suddenly, her attention was drawn to a man sitting on a nearby bench. He looked tired. His coat was worn, and his hands were bare, without gloves. He nervously searched his pockets, fishing out some change. Judging by his worried expression, it clearly wasn't enough. Victoria couldn't help but linger her gaze on him before, without much thought, stepping closer. "Do you need the bus?" she asked, pulling a few coins from her pocket. The man looked up. His gray eyes were wary, but there was no anger or shame in them. "Yeah, but it seems like today's not my lucky day." He attempted a smile, but it came out strained. Victoria held out the money to him. "Here. I know what it's like when a day doesn't go as planned." The man hesitated, then took the coins and nodded. "Thank you. My name is Andrew." "Victoria," she replied with a smile. At that moment, the bus arrived, and Andrew, thanking her once more, got on. Victoria remained at the stop, watching as he left. She didn't think much of the encounter and soon went on with her day. A few days later, returning home after a long day at the advertising agency, Victoria found a strange envelope in her mailbox. There was no sender, only her name, written in neat handwriting. Intrigued, she opened it. Inside was a note. "Dear Victoria, your kind heart did not go unnoticed. This small token of gratitude is just a reminder that the world is still full of good people. E." Pinned to the note was an elegant golden brooch in the shape of a star with a small blue sapphire at its center. Victoria froze, feeling a strange mix of surprise and confusion. Why had this man decided to send her such a gift? Who was he really? For the next few days, Victoria couldn't get the mysterious letter out of her head. She read the neat lines over and over, as if hoping to find a hidden meaning within them. The brooch lay on her bedside table, shimmering in the morning sunlight. It was too valuable to be accepted as a simple gift. Victoria wasn't used to unexpected gestures of attention, especially from strangers. One evening, sitting in her apartment with a cup of coffee, she picked up her phone and opened a search engine. She decided to see if she had any chance of learning more about the man who had sent her the letter. After all, she knew his name, Andrew. She started with a simple query: Andrew, New York. Thousands of results. Too many to find anything useful. So she added key terms: homeless, bus stop, charity. And then her heart started racing. One of the articles on a well-known news site told the story of a man named Andrew Marshall, a mysterious millionaire who had spent months posing as a homeless person to test human kindness. Victoria reread the lines multiple times until it finally sank in. It was him. The very same man she had helped on that freezing day. But why? What was the purpose of his experiment? The next day, Victoria decided to take the next step. She took the brooch, tucked it into the pocket of her coat, and headed downtown to the office of the company mentioned in the article. 1,000 questions swirled in her mind, but one stood out above the rest. What would Andrew say when she showed up at his door? Victoria stood in front of the imposing building, its mirrored windows reflecting the morning sun. The plaque at the entrance read, "Marshall Enterprises." She took a deep breath, gathering her courage, and stepped inside. The spacious lobby was designed in a sleek, minimalist style. Behind the reception desk sat a young woman with flawless hair and a welcoming smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" she asked. "I'd like to see Mr. Marshall," Victoria replied. feeling a nervous tightness in her chest. The receptionist gave her a brief, assessing look before typing something on her computer. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but he knows me." Victoria reached into her pocket, pulled out the brooch, and placed it on the desk. The woman's eyes widened in surprise, but she quickly regained her composure. "One moment, I'll check," she said, dialing an internal number. Several painfully long minutes passed before the receptionist returned and gestured for Victoria to follow. "Mr. Marshall will see you in his office." Victoria walked down the hallway, her heart pounding. When the office door opened, she saw Andrew standing by the window. He looked different, dressed in an expensive suit, exuding confidence, but his eyes still held the same warmth as before. "Victoria," he said with a smile. "It's good to see you again." She crossed her arms. "Care to explain what exactly is going on here?" Andrew sighed, closed the laptop on his desk, and gestured for Victoria to take a seat. "It's a long story," he began. "I have time," she replied curtly, keeping her gaze fixed on him. He nodded, as if gathering his thoughts. "A few months ago, I decided to conduct an experiment," he said. "I wanted to see how people treat those in need when there are no cameras, no newspapers, no reporters watching. That's how I ended up at the bus stop where we met." "And you thought it was okay to just test people?" Victoria frowned. "Maybe it seems cynical. But trust me, I saw a lot," he said, looking at her intently. "Most people just walked past without even glancing. Others pretended not to notice." He smiled slightly. "And then there was you." Victoria felt a warmth rise to her face. "But why the letter? Why the brooch?" "Because you did something that very few people would do. And I wanted to thank you," he replied. For a moment, silence hung in the office. "And now what?" she finally asked. "Now," Andrew leaned back in his chair. "I have a proposition for you." Victoria narrowed her eyes. "What kind of proposition?" "You mentioned you work at an advertising agency. I have a company in need of a creative director. I think you'd be a perfect fit for the position." Victoria was stunned. "You're joking?" "Not at all," Andrew smiled. "You're honest, you're not afraid to step forward, and you clearly have courage. Those are qualities I value." She hesitated. It was unexpected. Part of her wanted to decline. Everything about this felt almost like a fairy tale. But another part, the braver one, whispered that opportunities like this didn't come every day. I need to think about it," she said. "Of course," Andrew nodded. "Take your time. But I have no doubt you'd do well." She stood up, still holding the brooch in her palm. "Thank you for the meeting, Andrew. Thank you for your kindness, Victoria." She walked out of the office, and he remained by the window, watching as she disappeared through the door. Victoria stepped out of the Marshall Enterprises office, clutching the brooch tightly, and took a deep breath of the crisp winter air. New York carried on as usual. People rushed past, cars honked, and steam billowed from the manhole covers. But inside her, a storm of emotions raged. She walked along the sidewalk, oblivious to the people and buildings around her. Her thoughts were tangled. Andrew's offer was tempting, yet strange at the same time. Why had he chosen her? Could her small act of kindness at the bus stop really have made such an impression on him? Victoria was not the type to make impulsive decisions. She liked to weigh her options carefully. Her job at the advertising agency, while not entirely fulfilling, was stable. Leaving? For the unknown? To work for a man she barely knew? She ducked into a small cafe on the corner, ordered a latte, and sat by the window. "Well, Vicky, what are you going to do?" she murmured to herself. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. A message from her friend, Lauren. "Hey, where have you disappeared to? It's been ages. Dinner tonight?" Victoria exhaled. Maybe she needed to talk this over with someone. Later that evening, Victoria sat in a cozy Italian restaurant, sipping wine. Across from her, Lauren listened intently as Victoria recounted the events of the past few days. Wait, wait. Lauren leaned in, her brown eyes widening. You're telling me you helped some random guy at a bus stop? He turned out to be a millionaire, and now he's offering you a job? Exactly, Victoria sighed, running a hand through her hair. Vicky, this sounds like a movie plot. Lauren laughed, then turned serious. What do you think? I don't know. It's all so sudden. I'm not sure I'm ready to just switch jobs like that. Lauren tapped her fork against her wine glass. You know, I think this Andrew guy just wants good people around him. Didn't you say your current job doesn't really excite you? Yeah, but... So maybe this is your chance? Lauren shrugged. Victoria sighed. But what if it's a trap? What if he has some hidden agenda? Then you can always walk away, Lauren smirked. But if you don't try, you'll always wonder. Victoria fell silent. Maybe you're right. She picked up her glass and took a slow sip. A decision was forming in her mind. She just had to be brave enough to make it. The next morning, Victoria woke up with a firm decision. Her long doubts had faded. She was ready to take the risk. After getting ready, she chose a sleek yet elegant suit, tied her hair into a low ponytail, and, gripping the brooch tightly in her hand, headed to the Marshall Enterprises office. As she entered the building, she felt her heart beating faster. This time, she knew exactly why she was here. Good morning. The receptionist smiled, recognizing Victoria. Mr. Marshall has been expecting you. Victoria nodded and walked into the familiar office. Andrew stood by the window, but upon hearing her footsteps, he turned around. Victoria, I'm glad to see you, he said, studying her carefully. Your decision? She took a deep breath. I accept. A slight smile appeared on his face. Excellent. Welcome to Marshall Enterprises. He extended his hand, and Victoria shook it firmly, feeling that she was stepping into something entirely new. Her first day at work. The day began with an introductory meeting. Victoria was introduced to the team, but not everyone seemed welcoming. So, we have a newcomer? A voice spoke behind her. Victoria turned and met the gaze of a woman in her mid-30s, with impeccably styled hair and a cold smile. Lena, the woman introduced herself. Director of Marketing. Victoria, she replied, offering her hand. Lena hesitated for a moment, but then shook it. Strange appointment. Lena tilted her head slightly. You worked at a different agency before, right? Yes. Interesting how quickly some people get promoted, Lena added with a fake smile before walking away. Victoria felt the tension in the air. She knew she would have to prove herself. The day was intense: orientation documents, meetings, project discussions. Victoria immediately noticed the difference between her previous job and this one. Everything was faster, more serious. By the evening, after wrapping up her tasks, she stopped by Andrew's office. How was your first day? He asked. Interesting. But it seems not everyone is happy about my arrival. Andrew smirked. Don't pay attention to jealous people. You're here for a reason. Victoria nodded, realizing that this journey would not be easy. A week had passed since Victoria started working at Marshall Enterprises. Her days were scheduled down to the minute: meetings, discussions, working with clients. She was already getting used to the fast pace and had even earned the respect of some colleagues, but the tension in the team was still noticeable, especially from Lena. The woman never missed an opportunity to emphasize that Victoria was there thanks to someone's influence and seemed to be waiting for the right moment to set her up. But Victoria tried to keep her composure. One evening, as the office was starting to empty, she stayed late to finish an important presentation for an upcoming meeting with a major client. She was sitting in the conference room, carefully reviewing slides on her laptop when the door opened and Andrew walked in. "You're still here?" He raised an eyebrow. Victoria gave a tired smile. "I wanted to finish this." "Commendable." Andrew stepped closer and glanced at the screen. "May I?" "Of course." He leaned in to look at the slides, and suddenly Victoria became aware of how close he was. He smelled of expensive cologne, and his warm breath barely brushed her shoulder. Her heartbeat faltered for a second. "Great work," he said, straightening up. "I'm sure the client will be impressed." "Thank you." Victoria tried to keep her voice steady, but it wavered slightly. Andrew smirked, as if noticing something. "Are you nervous?" "No, it's just," she hesitated. "It's been a long day." He nodded, but amusement flickered in his eyes. "All right, I won't keep you any longer. But don't forget to rest." He turned toward the door. And then, suddenly, splash! They both spun around. On Victoria's desk, a coffee cup she had accidentally knocked over with her elbow was now spilling its contents all over her documents. "Damn!" she gasped, jumping up. Andrew quickly stepped forward and grabbed some napkins. "Let me," he started, wiping up the coffee. No, I got it." Victoria reached for the napkins at the same time, and in that moment, their hands touched. They both froze. Andrew looked at her, and she looked at him. A tense silence filled the air. Victoria felt her cheeks heat up. She quickly pulled her hand away. "It's fine," he said with a small smile, wiping up the last drop of coffee. But before he could say anything else, the conference room door suddenly swung open. And there stood Lena. "Oh, sorry," she said in a syrupy voice, scanning the scene. "Am I interrupting?" Victoria took a step back, trying to appear unfazed. "Of course not." Lena narrowed her eyes slightly. Just wanted to check if everything was ready for tomorrow's meeting. But it looks like you two have other matters to attend to." Her gaze flickered between Victoria and Andrew before she gave a knowing shrug and walked out. Victoria felt irritation bubbling in her chest. "Great. Now the rumors will start," she muttered. Andrew chuckled. "Don't worry. Let them think whatever they want." The next day, Victoria felt that something around her had changed. Her colleagues' glances became a little more curious, the whispers slightly louder. She knew exactly why. Lena. The news about how Andrew and Victoria had handled the coffee disaster together the previous evening had spread through the office at lightning speed. And, judging by the way people were talking, the story had been embellished to the point where it sounded like they had been flirting. "Vic, you're unbelievable," whispered one of her colleagues, Emma, when they crossed paths in the office kitchen. "What are you talking about?" "What?" "About last night, of course." Emma smirked, handing her a glass of water. "You do realize that half the department now has a theory that you're the boss's special favorite?" Victoria rolled her eyes. "Oh, for God's sake. Seriously?" "Oh, yeah. And trust me, Lena is absolutely thrilled about these rumors." Victoria sighed heavily. "I don't care what Lena thinks." "Yeah? Well, good luck with that, because she's definitely planning to make your life miserable." Emma nodded toward the door. Victoria turned and saw Lena standing in the doorway with an expression like she had just won an intellectual duel. "Victoria," she called out in a honeyed voice. "Do you have a moment?" Victoria narrowed her eyes. "Of course." Lena gestured for her to step into the conference room. "So," she began, settling into a chair, "we work in a serious company, and here we do not encourage." She paused for effect, raising an eyebrow meaningfully. "Unprofessional behavior." Victoria crossed her arms. If you have an issue with my work, say it directly. Lena smiled, but there was not a hint of friendliness in her eyes. I'm just advising you to be careful. Some people might think that you got your position, not entirely honestly. Victoria felt a wave of anger rising inside her. If some people think that, it's their problem. She shot back. I'm here to work. Lena leaned forward slightly. Then prove it. She abruptly got up and left the room, leaving Victoria fuming. For the rest of the day, Victoria worked even harder. She knew the only way to shut Lena up was to show results. As the workday was coming to an end, Andrew appeared in her office doorway. How was your day? Victoria exhaled tiredly. Interesting. I see rumors spread quickly around here. He nodded, leaning against the door frame. I figured that would happen. And you're not planning to do anything about it? Andrew smirked. Do you want me to? Victoria hesitated. No. I just don't want ridiculous gossip following me around. He studied her carefully. Victoria, in business, there will always be people who are jealous and spread rumors. The key is not letting it throw you off track. She sighed and nodded. You're right. Andrew raised an eyebrow in surprise. Did you just say you? Victoria froze, realizing her mistake. She had actually said you instead of Mr. Marshall. And judging by the way Andrew smirked, he had noticed. Getting comfortable around me? It was just a slip, she replied quickly, blushing. Of course, he nodded, still smiling. She rolled her eyes. Have a good evening, Mr. Marshall. He chuckled. You too, Victoria. She watched as he walked away, and suddenly, she realized that her irritation about the rumors had started to fade. Because, whether she liked it or not, something was definitely happening between them. A week had passed. Victoria worked tirelessly on the project, trying to ignore the whispers behind her back and the intense looks Lena kept throwing her way. But every time she let her guard down even a little, the office gossip found a new way to ruin her day. Have you heard? Emma asked, sliding into the seat next to Victoria at the cafe table. Heard what? Victoria shrugged, still making notes in her documents. The company's annual charity ball is happening in 2 weeks. Victoria glanced up. And? Emma rolled her eyes. And Mr. Marshall always brings a special guest. Guess who everyone thinks the top candidate is? Victoria shut her folder. Don't say it. Emma leaned in theatrically and whispered. You. Oh, God. Victoria covered her face with her hands. Why is everyone so sure? Because it's obvious he has a soft spot for you. We just work together. Sure. Victoria sighed in frustration. But soon, she had to take the matter seriously. The next day, she entered Andrew's office with a project report, but before she could say a word, he unexpectedly said, Victoria, I need to invite you somewhere. She froze. Where? Andrew leaned against his desk, crossing his arms. The charity ball. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. What? He smirked. Every year, I invite an employee who has made a significant contribution to the company. This year, that's you. Andrew, she stopped herself, realizing she had slipped into you instead of Mr. Marshall again. He noticed but said nothing. You've earned it. She shook her head. But if I go with you, it will only fuel the rumors. Andrew nodded. Probably. But that doesn't matter. Maybe not to you. But it does to me. He studied her carefully. Victoria, are you afraid of the rumors, or of the fact that you're starting to see me as more than just your boss? Her throat went dry. That's not the point. It is, he said gently. She met his gaze. If I agree, won't it be weird? It will be, he admitted. But weird doesn't mean bad. Victoria swallowed hard. I'll think about it. All right. Just don't take too long. The ball is soon. She turned and quickly left the office, feeling her heart pounding in her chest. Victoria spent the entire evening thinking about Andrew's invitation. On one hand, she didn't want to add fuel to the fire and give Lena another reason for gossip. On the other hand, she couldn't deny that the invitation meant more to her than just a formality. The next morning, as soon as she entered the office, she ran into Lena. The woman looked at her with a smirk. "Have you picked out a dress yet?" "Excuse me?" "Oh, come on, Victoria." Lena pretended to adjust a strand of hair. "Everyone already knows that you're going to the ball with Mr. Marshall. The only question is what you'll be doing afterward. A ball is more than just a social event. You do realize that, right?" Victoria clenched her teeth. "If you're implying something, say it directly." Lena chuckled. "Oh, I'm not implying anything. Just be careful. Men like Andrew Marshall love to play games, but they rarely take them seriously." Victoria felt anger bubbling inside her. "Thanks for the advice, but I'll handle it myself." She turned and walked toward her office, leaving Lena behind. But Lena's words lingered in her mind. Preparations. The next day, on an impulse, Victoria walked into a high-end boutique in the city center. She had never spent large amounts of money on clothes, but this evening was special. "May I help you?" A consultant approached her. "I need a dress. Something elegant, but not too extravagant." Half an hour later, she stood in front of the mirror, studying her reflection. A floor-length dark blue dress, fitting her figure perfectly. It accentuated her waist and flowed softly to the floor in delicate folds. Nothing excessive. "This is the one," she whispered. The night of the ball. Victoria arrived at the luxurious mansion where the charity ball was being held. She had barely stepped out of the car when she saw Andrew. He was waiting for her at the entrance. "You look stunning," he said, looking her over with a smile. "Thank you," she replied, feeling her heartbeat quicken. He offered his arm, and after a slight hesitation, she took it. They walked inside. The hall was filled with people, the murmur of voices blending with soft music. Victoria felt dozens of eyes on her. "Are you okay?" Andrew asked quietly. She nodded. "Yes, it's just unusual." "I'm right here." She looked up at him. There was no doubt in his eyes. The ball was in full swing. Victoria had already relaxed, forgetting about the gossip and ill-wishers, but everything changed the moment the orchestra started playing a slow melody. "Shall we dance?" Andrew extended his hand to her. She froze. "Andrew, this is..." "It's just a dance," he smiled, but there was something more in his eyes. She took a deep breath and placed her hand in his. As he led her to the center of the hall, Victoria felt countless eyes on them. But the moment they took the first step, everything around them disappeared. They moved in sync with the music, his lead was confident, and she allowed herself to simply be in the moment. "Victoria," he whispered, leaning in slightly closer. She looked up, and in that instant, she realized that things had gone much further than she had ever allowed herself to believe. After the dance, Andrew led her to the terrace, away from prying eyes. "I need to tell you something," he began. Victoria tensed. "What is it?" "Ever since that day at the bus stop, I haven't been able to get you out of my mind. You were the first person to act selflessly without any hidden motives." She felt something stir inside her. "Andrew, I never expected it to go this far," he smiled. "But now I know one thing. You're exactly the person I've been searching for my whole life." Her heart pounded wildly. "And now?" He gently took her hand. "Now, it's up to you." A few months had passed. Victoria stayed at the company, but now no one whispered behind her back. Andrew didn't hide their relationship, but he didn't flaunt it either. Everything was going its own way. Looking back, she realized that one random encounter had changed her life. One winter morning, almost like the one when it all began, Andrew took her hand. "Shall we go?" She smiled. "Let's go." Snow was once again falling over the streets of New York, and their story was only just beginning.